Just take a minute. Look around you. There's history being made. Has been. Will be. How can there not? Just something about those blue skies, high banks, and high speed, all coming together in one perfect race. And it'll be here sooner than you think.
Roll Tide and welcome to this Thursday edition of Crimson Drive, driven by NASCAR. This is Roger Hoover with you from our studios in Tuscaloosa, as we're only a couple of days away from Alabama against LSU in Baton Rouge, so it's time to talk some Crimson Tide football. We'll go through all of our headlines and what's coming up on the show today, thanks to the smart board that's been given to us by RJ Young. They are the official technology solutions provider of Crimson Drive, a really interactive way to go through our headlines and what's coming up on the show today. We'll start by hearing from the head coach of the Crimson Tide, Nick Saban, as he met with the media following Wednesday's practice for Alabama. Then we'll have a one-on-one conversation with Crimson Tide quarterback Bryce Young. It's the first time we've been able to speak to Bryce after he had the shoulder injury against Arkansas, missed the A&M game, but then came back and played really well against Tennessee and Mississippi State. So I think you'll enjoy hearing from the quarterback of the Tide, Bryce Young. Chris Stewart will be along to preview what's tonight on Hey Coach and the Nick Saban Show, plus give his thoughts on not only Alabama football, but men's basketball, as it got called the charity exhibition win against Southern Illinois. So some great talk coming up with Chris Stewart. Then we'll talk with Aaron Suttles of The Athletic for the big picture. He's out with a new book about Crimson Tide football, and he's also covering this year's team for The Athletic. So great perspective from Aaron. And then the other booth will round out the show today is Chris Blair, the voice of the LSU Tigers, will be along to give us a really detailed scouting report on Brian Kelly's team, now the 10th ranked team in the country, as we get ready for Saturday. That is the next challenge for the Crimson Tide. 2 critical weeks in a row on the road in the SEC West coming up. Starting this week down in Baton Rouge on what could be a really rainy, stormy day, all leading up to that kickoff at 6 p.m. under the lights at Tiger Stadium. You have the Crimson Tide ranked number 6 in the first college football playoff ranking of the season. LSU, surprised some people there, ranked 15th or 17th in some of the other polls, but the College Football Playoff Committee has the Tigers at number 10. So a top 10 matchup coming up this week, and of course, more honors for Will Anderson Jr., Alabama's outstanding linebacker, now a semifinalist for the Lombardi Award, one of just a few players to get that honor. Crimson Tide soccer team, no, we don't want to stop just yet. We look at the soccer team down in Pensacola getting a big win on Tuesday against Mississippi State. 2-0 was the final score, as Ashlyn Sarepka and Macy Clem both scored relatively early in the match, and that allowed Alabama's defense take over the rest of the way. A good 2-goal victory over the Bulldogs. Now tonight, it's Alabama against Vanderbilt in the semifinals coming up from Pensacola. That'll be coming your way at 5 o'clock on the SEC Network. And then don't forget as well, on Sunday, it will be the championship match at 1 p.m., also shown on the SEC Network. So good luck to Westhart and the Crimson Tide trying to continue what has been a tremendous season. Coming up, it'll be Alabama basketball Monday. It'll be the Crimson Tide women's team taking on Alabama A&M at 5 p.m. And then you'll have the men's team against Longwood at 7:30. We will have courtside cams of both of those games coming up on our CTSN social media channels, allowing you to watch the game with us. And Charles Bediako has been named to the Kareem Abdul-Jabbar Award watch list, as Charles Bediako did not play in the last game, was dealing with a minor injury, so he didn't play against Southern Illinois. Hopefully he comes back against Longwood coming up on Monday night, as it will be Alabama starting the season at Coleman Coliseum. Head coach of the Crimson Tide, Nick Saban, met with the media on Wednesday to give some final thoughts on what needs to happen for the Crimson Tide against the LSU Tigers. Here is coach's checklist with the head coach of the Crimson Tide, Nick Saban.
Well, I think the thing that we're trying to focus on is how do you maintain intensity? Whether you maintain your intensity in practice, whether you maintain your intensity in a game. But everybody's going to lose their intensity every now and then. So really, when you get in situations, you got to like pound your chest or whatever you got to do to regain momentum, regain, the mental focus you need to do to maintain intensity, because that's really the only way that you can sustain performance. So even days like today, it's a little warmer. We've had good practices all week. It's a challenge for guys to maintain their intensity, and it's a choice that everybody has to make. Nobody chooses to win. Nobody really chooses to lose. But you do have the freedom to choose what you want to do and how you want to do it. And I think that's the most important thing that players can do. And everybody has a choice to do that in whatever they do in their life. So that's what we're trying to get our players to do so that we can sustain and maintain intensity throughout the season. Obviously, it's rivalry game, playing on the road, good team. So it's going to be really important that we can do that. I mean, not at all. I think, it's what you attach yourself to. I mean, people attach themselves to winning, but if you attach yourself to winning, you're actually attaching yourself to outcome, right, which can actually create anxiety. I'd like for the players to attach themselves to, what do I have to do to play my best, to prepare the best, to be ready to go and play with confidence and understanding of what I'm supposed to do, how I'm supposed to do it, why I'm supposed to do it that way, and go play fast and do that one play at a time. And then that helps you get the result that you obviously want. So attaching yourself to doing the things you need to do to be a productive player is, I think, much more effective and even more fun, when you're a competitor and you go out and play that way to try to, when you say dominate your box, you do it one play at a time. So, and that's really why it's important to maintain the focus and intensity that way. I don't think it's really fair to assess anything that the offense has done because we've been a little bit left-handed ever since, Bryce got hurt in the Arkansas game. He basically hadn't been able to practice for however many weeks, 3 weeks, and played pretty well in 2 games. But, the continuity of what you do and how you build confidence and timing has been a little bit distorted by, how. Now, the good news is I think it was really beneficial to the 2 backup quarterbacks. I think they've got a ton of reps, and I think that's helped them. But it's not really fair to to see how we've sort of developed offensively, because probably the most important guy on the team, any team, is the quarterback. And most importantly on our team, because of the quality of player Bryce is. So we've been a little bit out of sorts. So I really challenge the players to be able to do things better, whether it's run the ball, run routes better, make more explosive plays, whatever that might be. But I think it's a little bit unfair to judge anything that's happened in the last couple weeks.
Experience racing like never before, from the sandy beaches of Daytona to the high banks of one of the most exciting super speedways on the NASCAR circuit. Don't miss on the 65th running of the Daytona 500 on February 19th, 2023. You can witness history in the making and purchase your tickets today at DaytonaInternationalSuperspeedway.com. We continue on Crimson Drive, driven by NASCAR, with a one-on-one conversation with Alabama quarterback Bryce Young. As we always get one-on-one conversations on this show with Tide football players. If you missed it on Tuesday, we had a great chat with Henry To'o, outstanding linebacker for the Crimson Tide. And now we get to speak with Bryce Young for the first time since he suffered an injury against Arkansas with that shoulder injury. Had to miss the second half of that ball game, all of the Texas A&M game, but he came back and has played well in the last 2 games against Tennessee and Mississippi State. And he joins us now on Crimson Drive, driven by NASCAR. Bryce, first of all, how was the open date for you? What did you really focus on this last week?
Yeah, it was a great week for us. We tried to, clean up some stuff on self-scout. Took a lot of mental reps. I was able to obviously get some treatment. Good to get feeling better, feel more healthy. So, it was a good week.
Yeah, how has the shoulder been progressing for you the last couple weeks?
Yeah, it's been good. It's been steady. I feel better every day. So that's super exciting for me.
What can you tell us about the medical team and your support around you during that time when you weren't able to play? How important were they?
Yeah, we have the best medical staff in the country. Everyone downstairs, they did a great job of helping me with recovery, with treatment, with all the stuff I had to do. They were really organized, always had a plan for me. So I'm continuing to get better. We're still working, and again, I'm feeling better every day. So I definitely wouldn't be feeling as good as I am or I am without those guys. So I'm just super grateful that we have them.
Even though I know you're disappointed not to play, but helping Jalen Milroe, what'd you see from him as he handled everything in your absence?
Yeah, J-Mo did a great job of stepping up. You could see him get more comfortable day by day in the game and in practice, just as everything progressed. And, he's stepping up on the field and, just through his leadership. He's done a great job. He's grown a lot since he's been here and a lot this year. So being able to watch him and to see him, take control when I'm not there, it is really fun to see.
Have you seen these wide receivers progress? And also, are you excited about Tyler Harrell? We were able to see him in the Mississippi State game.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like as a unit, it's just, again, week by week, you could see the growth, you can see the improvement. There's a lot of new faces coming into this year, but everyone's settled. Everyone knows their role and has gotten so much better, has gotten comfortable making the plays they have. And same thing with Tyler. Obviously it sucked to see him, he's doing a lot of good things, and then see him get hurt and, that setback that obviously sucks. But to see how hard he's been working, fighting back from that injury, he's always getting treatment, always in the training room. And, even when he wasn't able to practice or fully participate, he was still locked in a meeting, still learning, still asking questions. So to see him progress to where he is now, and, obviously he finally, was able to play against Mississippi State, and he's getting better and better in practice. It's super exciting to see.
Now you're going back on the road, Alabama against LSU, a big rivalry matchup Saturday night in Baton Rouge. Just what's going to be most important for this football team this week in your focus?
Just our week of preparation. We have to make sure we do everything right starting today and then moving forward until Saturday. We have to take it one day at a time. We understand the challenge ahead. It's a great team, great program. We know it's going to take everything. So for us, just making sure we take it day by day, having the best week of preparation we can, that's what we're most focused on right now.
Bryce, best of luck against LSU. Thank you for joining us. Roll Tide.
Thank you for having me.
Just take a minute. Look around you. There's history being made. Has been, will be. And it'll be here sooner than you think.
We look forward to seeing Bryce Young in action coming up on Saturday against the LSU Tigers in Baton Rouge. He'll be on the call for us on the Crimson Tide Sports Network, filling in for Eli Gold, as well as hosting tonight's edition of Hey Coach and the Nick Saban Show. I'm talking, of course, about Chris Stewart, who has been the longtime men's basketball voice of Alabama Crimson Tide Hoops, and he has already called one game this season, the charity exhibition from this past week. We'll talk about that in a minute, plus everything that's coming up, not only tonight on the network, but also on Saturday in Baton Rouge. It's time to chat with our good buddy, Chris Stewart. Roll Tide, it's good to see you. How was the open date in football? But your first look at the basketball team on Saturday.
Yeah, it's kind of funny, Roger. You phrased it as usual perfectly right, because I've had so many people say, "Hey, how'd you enjoy the off weekend?" I said, "Well, if you call what I do work, I did a little bit with basketball, and it was fun to see Nate Oates' team in action, and great to see them look as good as they did. People that just see the final score and see it was, a single-digit win, I think, or maybe 11-12 at the most. I can't remember the final, but it was 20-plus points with 5 minutes to go. And to Southern Illinois' credit, they closed strong, but Alabama had some different guys in and different combos. And the first time they really took the foot off the gas the entire game, which I know was great from Nate Oates' perspective. You won, you got to see a lot of great things. You got a chance to see your team play at a very high level for the majority of that scrimmage, but you got a chance to gnaw on them when it was over with because they didn't quite finish it the way you'd like to see it done. So he seemed to be pleased overall with what he got. I'm sure you've talked to him since I have even, but it was good to see that team out on the floor and see them do what they did, frankly, without shooting it very well. I think they only made 3 or 4 threes, which is not going to happen on a regular basis as this season goes on. It is way too deep, way too talented an offensive team and a shooting team to have that type number on a regular basis, but also to still find ways to get the ball in the basket at a pretty high clip when you don't shoot the three well. That was very encouraging, I thought.
So it was really good to see Alabama men's basketball for the first time this season with the exhibition before they start play next Monday night against Longwood at Coleman Coliseum. But this week we're getting a little bit back to football as Alabama has 4 really important games coming up. And this week, a game that is a top 10 matchup. Number 6 in the college football playoff rankings, Alabama. Number 10, LSU. It seems like the Tigers over the last few weeks have been playing some great football.
They have. And as you said, Bama's 6th in the rankings, which I know get a lot of people concerned and angst and what are we doing that far down? Frankly, it doesn't matter, because if you don't take care of business in this final month of the regular season, it's not going to matter whether you're sixth or first. If you take care of business with the opponents that you have or could potentially have, should you advance to an SEC championship game, Alabama will be in the playoff. I have zero doubt that that'll be the case. So one game at a time, one opponent at a time. And the first one is, of course, LSU, and a much better team than the one that lost to LSU, 3 weeks ago? Alabama, or to Tennessee, excuse me, 3 weeks ago. Alabama, a team that lost to Tennessee 2 weeks ago. I think Bama's better. I think LSU is much better than they were on that particular day at Tiger Stadium. And I expect it to be a very good LSU squad, one that's gotten better. And I think this is typical, Roger, of teams that get a new coach, new coaching staff. If you've got some talent, and clearly LSU does, they tend to be better on the back half than they are early because you're trying to figure it out. And this is a game where a team like that can be very dangerous. That being said, as tough as LSU is at home, historically, as good as they have been in night games at Tiger Stadium historically, history favors Alabama very well in Baton Rouge. I've been there for a bunch. I've seen losses. I've seen games that I thought were just absolutely about to be losses that turned out to be wins, thankfully. And I've also seen Alabama rout the Tigers. And, certainly you can't go in projecting a rout of a team like LSU. But I think there should, if you're an Alabama fan, you certainly don't have to go in dreading playing LSU. Respect, yes, but dreading, no.
Well, we're also getting set for the Thursday night edition of Hey Coach and the Nick Saban Show at Baumhauer's Victory Grill. Coach Saban joined you guys on the phone last week, but we understand he'll be back in person coming up on Thursday night. Are you excited about the show?
Absolutely. Always enjoy the visit with Coach, and that'll be fun to have in there. Nick Kelly from the Tuscaloosa News, who's done a great job covering that beat for the T News, is going to be our media guest, and visited with him a little bit earlier today off air, just talking about that. And looking forward to being with Nick, and also Dan Waters, the cross country coach, and Tide, of course, winning an SEC crown on the men's and women's side recently with their success in Tuscaloosa, getting a chance to host relays and conference championship. It's an exciting time for Alabama athletics. Just had soccer win the SEC title in the regular season, and going into the semifinals now, as you and I visit here on the program, and looking forward to seeing what all Alabama teams are going to do down the stretch of their season. And as we've talked about with basketball, getting ready to start a new campaign as well.
Certainly excited for it. Chris, just thank you for your time here on Crimson Drive. I look forward to hearing you with Coach Saban coming up later tonight on Hey Coach and the Nick Saban Show, plus Alabama against LSU on Saturday. Roll Tide.
Roll Tide, Roger. Thanks so much.
Fun time as always with Chris Stewart. We'll be visiting with another Chris that'll be calling the game in just a little bit, Chris Blair of the LSU Tigers. But right now we wanted to talk to one of our good friends here on the network, Aaron Suttles, who has covered Alabama football for a long time, most recently with The Athletic. He's out with a brand new book, taking a look at the history of Alabama football during the Saban era. So we figured it was a great time to catch up with him about everything going on with this Crimson Tide football team, plus take a larger historical look at the Crimson Tide football dynasty under head coach Nick Saban. Here's our big picture conversation with Aaron Suttles. We've already seen the Crimson Tide for 8 games, had the open date this past week. Just what's going to be most important for Nick Saban's group getting ready for these next 4 games starting this Saturday against LSU?
I think just showing some consistency. I think that's the one area that's really been missing with this year's team. Tons of talent, but they just have not put that talent to use consistently, whether it be penalties or wide receiver play. I think this is the stretch run. As you mentioned, they win these next couple of games. They're probably going to be in Atlanta playing either Georgia or a rematch with Tennessee. So, but can't put the cart in front of the horse there. They got a big one. And it's crazy, Roger. I think I need to revisit this because I ranked the games ahead of the season. I don't think I had this game very high up. And this game was usually sort of the game of the year during the Saban era. But the importance had dropped down because we just didn't expect much, and certainly the way LSU started their season. But all of a sudden, this is a pretty interesting game.
It really is, and it's good to have Bryce Young getting healthier at this point of the season. Do you feel like even the games that he missed, second half of Arkansas, Texas A&M, does that illustrate how important he is to this football team and how he was able to come back against Tennessee?
Yeah, it shows his value, right? That he's the most valuable player on this team, and without him, and we're looking at a 3-loss Alabama team probably right now, and he's doing so with. And I think the offensive line's played pretty well around him in pass blocking, but the lack of a consistent running game has limited their play action ability, and the wide receivers haven't progressed maybe as quickly as we thought they would have. But I mean, what he did at Tennessee, some of the throws he made in that environment were next level throws. Without him, they were getting blown out with him before the comeback, but without him, that game gets real ugly, and there is no comeback, and that would have been a really ugly loss. He showed how good he was that day.
And as well, he's been spreading the football around to a lot of different wide receivers. And you mentioned consistency in your first answer, and I'm sure we're still looking to find that from the receiver position. But do you feel like some more guys will become go-to targets as time goes along, or are we going to see it pretty evenly split among his favorite targets the rest of the way?
That's what we've seen this year. Is it's sort of been split, and we've been looking for a couple of quote unquote alphas to emerge, some guys that could be go-to wide receivers. If there were a drive to win the game, I don't know that any of us could predict who would be the receiver that you'd go to. I think Ja'Cory Brooks has had moments where he's looked really good. I think JoJo Earl's potential is very, very intriguing in this offense with his speed. When Cameron Latu as a tight end has been healthy, he's been a safe target for him. And then, Jahmyr Gibbs leads the team in receptions. And so out of the backfield, he's quietly been just a workhorse. But I still think based on what we've seen, unless a guy has had a great bye week and is ready to step up, it's really going to be sort of receiver by committee.
So that's a look at the Crimson Tide in 2022, but let's take a trip back 20 years to 2002 and a piece you published on Tuesday in The Athletic about Alabama beating LSU 31-0. It was Dennis Franchione, head coach of the Crimson Tide, Nick Saban, the head coach of the LSU Tigers. Just first of all, what was the genesis of the article and what did you find out in your reporting?
Just that it was a 20-year anniversary, and at the time, Alabama football was not what it is now, and wins like that were pretty rare and memorable. And Coach Franchione obviously left at the end of 2002, so people don't really remember that era fondly just because of all the darkness of the NCAA probation and sanctions, and then having a coach leave for Texas A&M. But it was the last time as a college head coach that Nick Saban has been shut out, which I think is remarkable. LSU had the number one defense in the country that year, and Alabama just ran the ball all up and down the field ran for 300 yards that day, ran it 54 times, controlled time of possession, and really just sort of, the throwback Alabama teams at Nick Saban where he talks about dominating your opponent. Well, that's what Coach Franchione's team did to Nick Saban. And then there was some drama with the head coaches sort of having some discussions at midfield before and after the game that added a little histrionics to that game. But, you start looking back, Tyler Watts was a great quarterback really before his time in terms of athleticism and some of the stuff that Coach Franchione's offense was doing. Sort of maybe the beginnings of RPO a little bit, at least not in its current form, but some of the concepts are a little the same. And Alabama fans will remember very fondly the smoke draw, which we clipped a couple of pieces. It's a weird looking play. It's a draw play, but it's weird the way it looks, but it was really effective that night in Baton Rouge.
Yeah, it certainly was. I love seeing how much Tyler had to sprint back to the running back before the handoff. It certainly was a great play. Yeah. Very cool. Well, I know you enjoy reporting on pieces like that and talking about the 20-year anniversary and looking back at Alabama's great football history. And I'm sure that was the spark for you to write your new book, The Program, that just came out this fall. What can you tell us about some of the essays that are in there and some of the great stories you're able to tell?
Yeah, I consider myself very fortunate that I've covered this period of Alabama football. Any success I've had in my career really is because of that, because of the platform I've been given, because people have been paying a lot of attention to Alabama football because of how good it's been. But with that, I sort of always have felt a responsibility that I have this front row seat to history. There's a responsibility that comes along with that to document some of the access that I've been given to players and coaches and some of the great games and the recruiting, the national championships. I mean, Roger, I've covered 9 national championship games. It's just sort of unheard of. for one program to have that level of sustained excellence. So with that, I wanted to write a book and be able to say, hey, this was what I witnessed, which is sort of remarkable. And it was more of a responsibility I felt than anything else, but it's a lot of work writing a book. I may not do it again, but I'm certainly proud that it's out and it's got a cool looking cover. And I think one day my son will be proud that his daddy was an author.
Yeah, that really is nice. Again, it's available in bookstores and online now. And I'm sure a big part of it as well was just the start of the Coach Saban era, and something you also had in The Athletic during their Coaching Carousel series was talking about Mal Moore and his personal mission and how delicate that search was at so many different points. Just what you learned in reporting, and maybe you had heard some things about that initial search, but then going back 20 or almost 20 years later, I'm sure unearthed a lot more.
Yeah, just how well respected Coach Moore was within Alabama to this day, even. And what a gentleman. He's sort of the last of that era of athletic directors. It's now very much a business, and you have to be a CEO of a business to run an athletic department. And it was then too, to a lesser degree, but he was more, for lack of a better word, folksy about it. There was a charm to Coach Moore, and that was what enabled him to raise all that money for the capital campaign, which we've seen all over the University of Alabama for their athletic facilities. He started that. But yeah, he sort of locked in on Coach Saban, and against all odds, pushed all his chips to the middle of the poker table when people around him were saying, you don't have the cards to win this hand. And he stuck it out. He bluffed everyone and made maybe arguably the most important hire in the history of college football, because listen, Nick Saban was good, but as we talked about in that article that was released this week, he wasn't viewed as he is today. He'd won the one national championship at LSU, was certainly thought of as a very good coach, but no one was saying he was the greatest of all time. So there was a little bit of wisdom in Coach Moore, seeing something in Coach Saban, wanting to rebuild this Alabama program, and it's been rebuilt to levels I don't know that anyone on the face of the planet thought it could reach any program, really. But the fact that it happened at Alabama after already having what was considered the greatest coach of all time in Coach Paul Bryant, this is sort of makes you shake your head. How did one program get both of those guys?
It's amazing, and I'm sure you cover this in the book as well. Coach Saban comes to Alabama, wins the national championship in 2009, but what were you feel like were some of the big moments after that to get this not just to a dynasty and winning all those titles with some of those early waves of players, but kind of the super dynasty that stretched across so many different recruiting classes and years?
Yeah, I think it's Coach Saban. There's no secret. He tells you what it is, and it's the ability to fight against our human nature every day. To do the things that you don't feel like doing, that you have to do to sustain a level of success. And he holds everyone in that program accountable to that. The players that he brings in recruiting, the academic staff who help those players achieve where they want to go in their academic careers, the coaching staff that he brings in. I mean, the coaches that turn over, it doesn't matter. They play pretty consistently, no matter who the offensive or defensive coordinators are. It's just him. I think you could place him in any business in the world, and he could be a Fortune 500 CEO. There's no doubt in my mind. His level of organization, his level of nothing slips through the cracks. And if it does slip through the cracks, it slips through the cracks once. And not only do they have a plan to deal with it going forward, they've probably made a plan to make it better going forward. And all the challenges he's been presented in his career, the new rules in college football, that are in terms of the game, the way the game went offensive, the way they kept him off the field with the Nick Saban rule. No matter what challenges are in front of him, he will find a way to meet those challenges and probably improve. And it's to a point where other people start copying him. He's just there's no secret sauce. He tells you what it is. It's the process. It's hard to do, but he's found a way to do it better than anyone in history.
Certainly has, and that's certainly a big part of the program. Alabama, a curated history of the Crimson Tide, written by Aaron Suttles, forward by Reese Davis. It's available now. Aaron, just thank you so much for joining us here on the Crimson Tide Sports Network. Loved learning about the book and also what may still be ahead for Nick Saban and the Alabama Crimson Tide this year. But all the best to you. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Invite everyone to check out Aaron's new book, The Program Alabama, a curated history of Crimson Tide footballs. We've seen really a couple of great books come out this year on Alabama and Coach Saban. We had John Talty join us earlier in the year to talk about his book, The Leadership Secrets of Nick Saban. Aaron's another great one as well. It's never too early to start thinking about Christmas time and gifts for your family, fellow fans, and loved ones. So, again, great conversation with Aaron, learning about his new book. Again, the program Alabama, a curated history of Crimson Tide football. Well, we are going to be playing a big football game under the lights at Tiger Stadium in Baton Rouge coming up on Saturday, and that means we get to see just down the hall in the other booth our good friend Chris Blair is the voice of the Fighting Tigers, and he joins us now to give us a scouting report on Brian Kelly's team as we get set for Saturday. What's on the menu Saturday night? Do we have gumbo? Do we have jambalaya, crawfish etouffee? What do you got cooked up for us in the Tiger Stadium press box?
I don't know. I think there's typically hot dogs. I think there'll probably be one of those varieties that you just talked about. And hopefully it'll be dry, at least by 6 o'clock. That's what I'm most worried about is, it looks like the weekend was going to be great this past weekend looking ahead. But you know what happens when you do a 7-day forecast, you might as well flip a coin. So right now we're hoping that the rain comes early in the morning, early afternoon, and then gets out of here. So thank goodness Georgia and Tennessee are playing, and they took the 2:30 slot, so we can play at 6 o'clock, and hopefully it'll be somewhat dry. But looking forward to it. Should be a great game, and as I've said many times, the way it ought to be, with two top-ranked teams, top 10 matchup according to the college football playoff earlier in the week. And I think that's good for the SEC. I think it's good for LSU. It's good for Alabama. It's good for college football.
Certainly is. And just what can you tell us about the journey this LSU team has been on from the opening game against Florida State to where we are now? Just take us through the ups and downs we've seen for the Tigers this year.
Roger, I think I'll take you back to January. Coach Brian Kelly, hired in December, was on the ground for the most part, didn't have a real coaching role leading into that bowl game, but that was about as low can get, just over 30 scholarship players. You've got a former defensive back, former wide receiver as your quarterback, and Kansas State has no problem taking care of a very, undermanned LSU team. So then you go into spring football and you start to see kind of the building blocks on the very bottom level of this program from Coach Kelly, who's got 30 plus years of head coaching experience. He's the winningest active coach in Division I football, closing in on 300 wins. And you kind of figure out real quick, I think this guy knows what he's doing, and he's had a lot of success. This probably has a lot to do with that. So they came in, they raised the entire football operation, started to build it back. And, again, you're using the transfer portal. You're using, a last minute push before the early signing period, then the second signing period. So you really don't know coming out of spring football, Roger, what it's going to be. You do know it's headed in the right direction. And then you open the season and, you come up short with a valiant second half effort, but you come up short to Florida State and you think, okay, we were hoping miracles could be done in a couple of months, but maybe not. This is a work in progress. And then you just started to see this team get better and better. And it's easy for us to sit back now and say, hey, Coach Kelly was kind of telling us this is how the season would go. But we don't like to give coaches a lot of credit, especially when they don't win every game. But the truth of the matter is he kind of steadied the course. This is what we're going to do. We keep doing these things every day and putting in the work. Things are going to start to come our way. And really over the last two games, it's amazing. The win over Florida at the Swamp, and then the win over number seven Ole Miss here at Tiger Stadium, over 500 yards. They averaged 514 yards of total offense, in those two games, which sounds like an ordinary Saturday for Alabama. But to put it in perspective, the last time LSU had back-to-back 500-plus yard games was the college football playoff of 2019. Now, that happened to be 600-plus yard days against Oklahoma and eventually Clemson. But that's kind of where we've gone in, 8, 9, 10 months so far. So now we start November and we start with, the top level in college football, 87th meeting between LSU and the Crimson Tide.
Certainly excited for it. And we look forward to seeing as well Jaden Daniels. We know he's played really well at quarterback for LSU. Just what's made him so effective, not just as a passer, but also as a runner?
I think we learned early on, Roger, that he had the ability to run the football, and in space, he can make guys miss. He's one of the guys that is tops in college football for a quarterback who's had missed tackles. He makes guys miss. So we saw that early against Florida State, and it was almost as if, okay, when are we going to get these talented wide receivers involved. They've got talent and they've got experience, and yet we're really relying on our quarterback to make big plays in improvised runs, if you will. But two things Coach Kelly said about Jaden Daniels when he announced how and why he was named quarterback number one for LSU. He said, number one, he's coachable, and number two, he can forget about the play before, whether it was good or whether it was bad. He is a pretty even keel individual, doesn't get too high, doesn't get too low, and can focus on doing the next play. And he said that throughout the first 5 or 6 weeks of the season. And everybody was clamoring, why aren't we using the receivers? Why aren't they throwing to Kayshon Boutte? Why are they not throwing 9-10 times to Malik Neighbors? And there was kind of a process that had to take place. This is a guy that comes from Arizona State, doesn't know anything about these receivers, but he's coachable and he's able to put plays behind him. And I think those two characteristics now over the last 2 or 3 games, including the Tennessee loss, which was not a great performance, although Jaden played pretty well as far as numbers are concerned. He's starting to understand what his coaches mean. Let's get these guys involved. Let's take a few shots. Let's be aggressive. And he's been very good protecting the football, only 1 interception on the season. He's had 11 touchdowns accounted for in the last 2 games. And he's now trusting his receivers that I'll throw the ball up there. And I think 9 times out of 10, my guy's going to go make the play. And that's really the evolution of Jaden Daniels here in the 2022 season.
So a lot of talent on the offensive side of the ball, of course, but how about defensively? Who are some of the key playmakers on that LSU defense?
Well, I think it starts with Matt House, defensive coordinator. And anybody who's followed Alabama and LSU, both of these teams and both of these fan bases take a lot of pride in their defense. And frankly, the last 2 seasons, LSU's defense has been almost historically the worst in history. And it's going back a ways. They have not played well. So I think it starts with Matt House. I think he is one of those guys, a lot like the offensive coaches this year, took a little time to find out what he had, how to put the guys in best situations to perform at their best. And now after 8 weeks, you're starting to see him be able to make those decisions on the fly in the game. But for as far as personnel that's involved, it starts with BJ Ojulari. He's just he's going to translate to the next level. He is one of those elite defenders, an edge rusher that can cause disruption and really put some pressure on quarterbacks. Obviously the cornerbacks aren't household names the way they have been over the last couple of years. Number 1, Derek Stingley went off to the NFL, and number 2, Eli Ricks decided to go to Tuscaloosa. But you have seen really good cornerback play. In fact, Mekhi Garner is one of the highest rated cornerbacks in the country. In fact, probably the lockdown corner in the SEC based on statistics. So I think the cornerbacks surprisingly have held their own and have probably surprised a lot of people. But the one guy that has been super electric has been Micah Baskerville. And he's been around a while. He's waited his time, and now he's making plays. He's very good laterally, side to side, sideline to sideline. He can play up. He is really good against the run. And then another guy that you'll see a lot of on Saturday will be a true freshman, Harold Perkins Jr., highly touted coming out of Cypress, Texas, so far as advertised. Just had a phenomenal game, his best career game against Ole Miss. Another guy who can cover the field side to side and has no problem even dropping back in coverage at that linebacker spot. And one thing, Roger, to look for is that you'll see either BJ Ojulari, the edge rusher I mentioned earlier, either come out or move inside, and they'll bring Harold Perkins up as the edge rusher. That's the skill set he possesses. So I think all in all, the success of LSU's defense, which has gotten better each and every week, is simply because there are a lot of versatile players that Matt House can move around, and it allows them to not have to go to all-out blitzes. They can pick and choose where the blitz is coming from, where the pressures are coming from, and in a lot of ways help disguise them a little bit, which I think at times has confused opposing quarterbacks. We'll see what happens Saturday.
Coming off a good performance, held Ole Miss only 20 points just 2 weeks ago, and now we get set for Alabama against LSU. And Chris, I'll get you out of here on this. It seems like the college football world has been fixated on Brian Kelly and his fit in Baton Rouge with this program. That's been one of the narratives ever since he took the job from Notre Dame. But just what's it been like for you to get to know Coach Kelly and see firsthand how he's going about his business in Baton Rouge?
It's just been phenomenal. I've really enjoyed the working relationship, but I also enjoy just being around people that have those highly successful habits, Roger, because it translates to what I do. It translates to what everybody does here at LSU. And I think a lot of people have been infected by it in a good way with the kind of the system that Coach Kelly has. He's got a great dry sense of humor. He likes to smile. He likes to have a good time, but he doesn't like a lot of wasteful time on the other hand. I mean, if it's time to work, it's time to work. And I can certainly appreciate that. But it's no surprise when you're around him and you're around the people that he surrounds himself with, that he has had the success that he has had. So it's been a lot of fun this season. And, I don't think me, and certainly not the national media, they did not think that the first Saturday in November, LSU and Alabama would be battling for the top of the SEC West 6 months ago, 8 months ago, and dare I say 3 months ago. So I think the success speaks for itself for what Coach Kelly's done in a very relatively short amount of time.
We're looking forward to Saturday night under the lights in Baton Rouge, Alabama against LSU. Chris, thank you so much for joining us, giving a scouting report on the Fighting Tigers. I look forward to seeing you in the next couple of days. Thank you again.
Absolutely, Roger. Looking forward to it, to your first experience on a Saturday night in Death Valley.
Well, on all the major networks, somebody named Chris is calling the game. We have Chris Fowler on play-by-play on ESPN, and then, of course, our Chris Stewart, and then Chris Blair, who you just heard from on the LSU Sports Network. Really appreciate his insights on Brian Kelly and the LSU Tigers as we get set for Saturday. And with that, it is time for our Wickles Weekend Update that is brought to you by Wickles Pickles. They are wickedly delicious. We have the pickle chips plus the okra here on set with us for each and every show. Very delicious, especially that okra. It's a good weekend for okra as we get into our first weekend in November. Let's take a look at what is coming across the Crimson Tide Sports Network this weekend with our Wickles Weekend Update. Later tonight, it will be Alabama. Well, of course, the head coach of the Crimson Tide, Nick Saban, hosting along with Chris Stewart, hey coach, and the Nick Saban show from Baumhower's Victory Grill. No game tonight. I am thinking about the Alabama soccer game that will be on the SEC Network at 5 o'clock. But yes, we will have, of course, hey coach and the Nick Saban show coming your way at 6:30 in Tuscaloosa at Baumhower's Victory Grill. Tomorrow, maybe if you're making your way to Baton Rouge, it's a great time to catch up with This Week on the Crimson Tide Sports Network podcast. And then Saturday is game day, Alabama against LSU. Our radio coverage will begin at 3 o'clock and the kickoff at 6 p.m. under the lights at Tiger Stadium. Coming up on Sunday, we'll have a recap of the game with the head coach of the Crimson Tide, Nick Saban, with his television show that he co-hosts with Chris Stewart. And then Kinsey Hughes and I team up for Tide TV this week, taking a look at all Alabama sports, including a one-on-one conversation with Dan Waters, fresh off cross country's SEC championships. Then on Monday, we will have the start of the basketball season. Alabama women's basketball at 5 o'clock against Alabama A&M. At 7:30, men's basketball against Longwood. Both of those games, of course, carried on our full radio networks, and we will have the courtside cam available for both games as well here on our social media outlets. And we will still have Crimson Tide Rewind coming up at 6 p.m. on Monday night as Todd Robbins will fill in for me, along with Corey Reamer for that show at Baumhower's in Vestavia Hills. So that show will still be active coming up this week, even though we will have basketball, of course, on Monday. And then don't forget, we will be back at it with another edition of Crimson Drive driven by NASCAR starting next Tuesday at 2 o'clock. Speaking of Crimson Drive driven by NASCAR, don't miss out on your chance to experience the energy and the excitement of the iconic Daytona 500. Witness history in the making and purchase your tickets today at DaytonaInternationalSuperspeedway.com. Got to say a big thank you to all the guests we've had on the show today, including Bryce Young, Chris Stewart, Chris Blair, Aaron Suttles, and of course we had comments from head coach Nick Saban earlier as well. Thanks to our video producer, Ethan Carabin, for putting the show together. Thanks to all of you for watching this Thursday edition of Crimson Drive driven by NASCAR. This is Roger Hoover saying thanks again for watching. Have a safe weekend. Let's hopefully get another win for this Crimson Tide football team. And by the next time we talk, hopefully we're talking about a win over LSU and some basketball victories as well. It's an exciting time of the year. It's all happening, and you can catch it all here on the Crimson Tide Sports Network. Roll Tide, everyone.